Hi everyone, my name is Grace Golajuk and I'm one of the Assistant Clinical Directors and Occupational Therapists at Skills on the Hill. And my colleague, Miss Annie Poole, is also here. She's an occupational therapist as well that works with us at Skills on the Hill. We're really excited that everyone's here today to learn about sensory-friendly summer scheduling. And we're also really excited that this is the first webinar to kick off our parent education series for surviving summer. We have lots of awesome information to share with you guys this summer, especially given the pandemic that's going on, to give you some ideas to just help get through the summer and have your kids be as happy and continuing to learn as possible. So we have some content that we'd like to share with you today. Feel free, if you have a question at any time, to put it in the chat, and we'll be monitoring those chats to answer as we go along. And then we also have some time saved at the end for questions, so we'll be able to answer some questions at the end as well. So the first thing we'd like to touch on are the benefits of sensory input throughout the day and why it's really important for your child as well as for adults and the whole family to get sensory input during their day. Sensory input throughout the day can help improve regulation, it can improve attention, and it can have a positive impact on behaviors throughout the day. The goal is really that your child is getting these doses of inputs that are calming, organizing, and regulating for their body and for their nervous system to be able to maintain that adequate level of arousal and be able to self-regulate throughout their day and all the activities that they might be doing. Another word that we really like to use is being proactive. If you have a plan to provide them with these organizing types of input throughout their day, then you're less likely to see moments where you might see things that look like negative behaviors or difficulty participating, or your child just having difficulty maintaining kind of that level of arousal that's optimal to be able to learn and to play and to participate in their routines throughout their day. And lastly, as OTs, we love to set children up for success. So again, providing these structured sensory inputs throughout the day that we're going to talk a little bit more about throughout this presentation will just help set your child up for success. And it's really important that we have these structured into our days and that we're not just trying to provide the sensory input when it's essentially too late and the child is already having a meltdown or having significant difficulty with participation and regulating their bodies. Okay, the next one is we're going to give you a little information about the types of sensory input that are really important to help children with grounding, organizing, and calming. So the first one is proprioceptive input, and this is something that a lot of you may have heard if your child is currently working with an occupational therapist. These are receptors that are in our joints and in our muscles, and they give us information about where our body parts are in relation to one another and contribute to our overall body awareness. So activities that target this system is really that heavy muscle work. We often call it heavy work. So these activities are very, very important to incorporate multiple times throughout the day, especially given that children have not been in school, they're not maybe doing camps or just other community activities that they usually do in the summer. A lot of pools aren't open. Playgrounds are just reopening, but kids probably aren't getting that heavy work that they have in past summers through their activities that they do kind of on a regular basis. So it's really important that we're proactive with giving these types of input. So anything involving climbing, pulling, pushing, lifting, dragging, jumping, crawling, all target this system. So anything at the playground is great. Backyard time, going for a walk also targets this system. As you can see in this picture, the crab walk is another great way to get input in a more intense way, targeting the proprioceptive system. The next system is the vestibular system, and those are receptors in our inner ears that sense movement when our head moves out of an upright plane. So it's really important that we're giving our child the opportunity to move in all different planes and directions and get their head out of that upright position. This gives them a sense of where their body is in space, and again is really important for that maintaining that level of regulation throughout the day. So anything that involves jumping, again, play activities where they're running and moving their heads in different planes. The down dog pose is great for this. Same with somersaults, things like rolling, really anything where they're getting up and moving. Things like having a dance party, watching a video, maybe on Go Noodle or on another online platform where they're moving, and being able to feel their body and get that feedback as to where their body is in space is really important to incorporate throughout their day. And this type of input is also alerting, which we'll go into a little bit more detail about, but it's important, if children are spending a lot of time sitting, that we're considering the need to move to help with being able to be alert during seated tasks, such as working on school-based activities, meal times, anything where they're expected to sit for a significant amount of time. And then the last big one that we'd like to touch on is the tactile system, and we especially want to focus on providing that deep touch pressure. This input is really grounding and calming. It also helps children really feel where their body is in space, where their body parts are in relation to one another. So this is a type of input that we should be thinking about incorporating, again, multiple times throughout the day. So things like a heavy blanket, a weighted blanket, squishes with pillows or couch cushions, rolling a ball over the child's body, doing yoga poses such as cobra are also great, or doing activities where the child is lying on their belly in a prone position allows them to have more contact with their skin on the floor, and that can also provide them with this deep touch pressure so that they're feeling grounded into the earth. Other considerations are providing opportunities for oral motor input. This can be things like incorporating using a straw to drink out of. It can also be doing games with a straw, such as blowing a pom-pom ball through a maze, making a bubble mountain with soapy water. This type of input is also something that can be really organizing and regulating for children. Things like gum or adding snacks that are chewy or crunchy into their day can also be a really nice tool to help them organize and regulate. And then auditory and visual input is also something that we need to consider. We need to be mindful of the auditory and visual environments that our children are in. If a child's in a situation where there's a lot of auditory and visual input happening, such as from the TV or from loud music or from siblings and other family members being around them, pets, anything like that, some children are sensitive to that input, and it takes a lot for them to process that input and then be able to produce an expected response. So a lot of children and adults, all of these things are things that we can relate to as adults as well, and we all have our own patterns that can help us, understand where our children are coming from. So taking a break with reduced auditory and visual stimuli are also really important, and that could involve using noise-canceling headphones, going in an area where the door is able to be closed or the sound and the vision are occluded, making a fort, going under a blanket, having a space that's a little smaller and able to block out that external stimuli can be really, really important. And that's also important to consider when looking at screen time. Having a screen or a TV can provide us a lot of really fast visual input and also auditory input in a lot of, the video games and the TV programs. Those things can cause our children to be upregulated or disorganized. So it is important that we consider what types of activities that we're choosing and allowing them to have those breaks from the stimuli. So how to incorporate these sensory activities based on the systems we just talked about. Our big thing is we need to make it fun. So we need to make it motivating for our children. As adults, we can probably relate to having difficulty fitting yoga in every day if that's something we feel like we should do. We might not be motivated to go do a down dog in another room if it's not something that sounds like fun. So we need, especially for children, to think about ways to make it fun. So we can include games, things like a yoga spinner. We can make movement cards. So animal walk cards are great, and it can be something that they use for relay races. We can incorporate siblings where they pick a card and then they have to do the animal walk and crash, and then they come back and pick another one. Memory match games are a great way to incorporate some of these gross motor exercises in a visual way. So anything that we can show them visually and then incorporate into a game is really helpful. You could have exercise cards that are printed out or that you've bought, and you could hide them around the room and make it a scavenger hunt. And when they find that card, they have to do the exercise. You can have them animal walk from one room to another while they're finding puzzle pieces. There are lots of different ways that we can make it fun, but just taking that extra step to be a little bit creative and make it fun and add some structure can really go a long way. And then, of course, we encourage that parents do it with them or give them a model. Sometimes, especially if a child is working on body awareness and motor planning skills, it might be hard for them to look at a picture and know exactly what to do with their body to imitate. So anytime that as a parent you can model it for them or have a sibling model it for them, that can be really helpful. Tapping into using some videos that can be found on YouTube or websites like Go Noodle or Cosmic Kids Yoga is a great one. Anything where they're able to have that visual model can be really helpful. And then we, of course, want to tap into what's motivating and preferred for our children, so we can sneak in some of this extra sensory movement-based input or deep pressure input with a preferred activity. So if your child loves playing with Legos, we can add some deep pressure into that by having them seated or lying on their belly on the floor with a heavy blanket over them or with a big pillow or a couch cushion over them so that they're in a cave playing with Legos. And then they're getting that extra deep pressure input, which is really grounding and organizing, and then helps their body be more calm and regulated throughout that activity, and then for whatever activity they'll be doing next within their day. And then same thing, we can lie on the floor to change their head position. So we can have them lying on their bellies. You could have them lying on their back and taping a coloring page under a table so that their head's in a different plane and they're doing some upside down coloring. Thinking again about ways to tap into that vestibular system and get their head in a different plane for that alerting and regulating input. So here's the how. So we've touched a little bit on different types of input, some that are more alerting, some that are more organizing, and some that are more calming. So as I've mentioned, those movement-based activities in which we get our head in different planes, like jumping, running, rolling, and swinging, are typically alerting types of input that target that vestibular system. Those heavy work activities that we mentioned that target the proprioceptive system are things like pushing, pulling, carrying, crawling, jumping, climbing. All of that heavy work input tend to be really organizing for our body and give us that feedback as to where our body parts and our limbs are in relation to the rest of our body. And that's something as adults, again, we can probably relate to. I'm sure some of you, and myself included, benefit from going to the gym, going for a run, or weightlifting in the morning before a full day of work to get that organizing input to then be able to be in a more regulated state to start the day. And then the last one is calming, which again, we've touched on. So any rhythmical movement like rocking or linear swinging falls into this category. Squeezing, which can be any deep pressure. It can be bear hugs. It can be the parent providing squishes or squeezes to different parts of the child's body. And then any deep pressure, which is provided again through squeezes and through some of those weighted items that we talked about, like a blanket or a pillow or a cushion. So some examples of ways to incorporate these types of input are listed here. So again, just trying to tap into ways using things that you might have at home. So jumping on couch cushions would be alerting, doing animal walks over couch cushions, such as a bear walk or a crab walk, gets more of that heavy work input into our joints. So that can be more organizing. So those are two things, if your child is seeking out jumping on a couch cushion, but you feel like they're already in this high level of arousal and you want them to bring it down and be more organized, you can redirect to do a bear walk or a crab walk and model it, make it fun and play-based so that they're getting more of that proprioceptive input to organize their body. And then for calming, something like doing squishes between cushions. You can make a sandwich with your child. You can add toppings by doing squishes. That input can be really calming for a time when they're, again, in that high level of arousal and you really need to bring it down. Another type of alerting input for older kids could be loading or unloading a dishwasher. In order to get down to the bottom of the dishwasher, they have to move their head into more of an upside down plane, into a different plane, and then they have to reach up to put it into the cabinet. So that can be a good natural activity to get their head in some different planes. For a younger child, you could do other play-based activities like the down dog pose. You could do the waterfall or the elephant pose where they hang their head down and then they raise it back up while using their elephant trunk. You could do something like upside down bowling where they have to stand backwards facing the pins and put their head upside down and bowl through their legs. So there are lots of different ways that you can add that into play. For organizing input, another great one for older kids is taking out the trash, great way to get that heavy work. And then for calming, relaxing in a rocking chair can provide that rhythmic calming input. And then something that we could do with a blanket to target each of these. For alerting input, the child could sit on the blanket and a parent or a sibling could pull them around the room to get their head in different planes. They could lie on their side or their back, or they could sit and you could pull kind of in different directions if they need that alerting type of input. To target the heavy work, the child could put stuffed animals or toys on their blanket and then pull it around to take them for a ride, and then they're getting that resistive input through their joints. And then for calming, so targeting that deep pressure input, you could have the child roll up in a blanket and make a burrito, and again, make it kind of a play-based activity to get them that extra deep pressure input. In terms of when, the impact of these types of input last about an hour and a half to 2 hours. So again, that shows us that it's really important to get moving several times a day. So we need to be doing these types of activities, approximately every 2 hours. And it depends on the child. Every child and every person has a different threshold for how much they can handle. If they're doing more intense vestibular input like spinning, that can last a little bit longer in the body. So part of it is doing a little bit of trial and error to see what works best for your child, but we really want to get the point across that it's important to do this multiple times frequently throughout the day. And we'll talk a little bit more about some specific ways to schedule these, but we want this to work for what you're already doing. Meal times can be a really nice way to plan out when to do these. So it might be something like after breakfast or before school or another community activity. Maybe before lunch, before dinner, before bed can be really natural ways to add these types of input. And we'll get a little more into some more specifics in this regard as well. So I will turn it over to Annie, and she will talk a little bit more about all of the scheduling pieces and how to start putting these into your schedule now that we understand the differences between these different types of input that are really important.
Yeah. I think something that's important to remember is that everyone has different ways that they use their sensory systems throughout the day to stay regulated. So as adults, we might do things like chew gum in the afternoon if we're feeling a little more sleepy, or like Grace mentioned, exercise before work in the morning. We might have a weighted blanket that makes us feel comfortable if we're feeling restless, or if we're just wanting to kind of wind down at the end of the day. So the way that scheduling can really be helpful is providing those appropriate opportunities throughout the day to really model for children how to regulate their arousal level, and to work with them to find out how to structure their day so that they're able to stay regulated throughout the whole day. So two of the big pieces to remember in scheduling are consistency and clarity. So it's important that routines are consistent, and that's really big for helping children know what to expect, know what's coming, because that's one way to help stay calm and stay focused for the day, and reduce anxiety, and also any type of transition that is unexpected might be something difficult to experience through the day. So having that consistency reduces the amount that you might have unexpected change or unexpected transitions. And then the clarity. So knowing what's available at that moment, knowing what type of thing we're doing in the morning and what type of thing we're doing in the afternoon, and having visuals to really support them, and understanding what they're doing throughout the day. So this picture here is a type of visual app that's a visual timer. So you can set any amount of minutes that you want, and then when you click start, it shows you, it starts green and it moves. And so that way, for children who don't have an understanding of 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 30 seconds, can look at it and see how much time has elapsed. And that can be really helpful for transitions and for understanding how much time we are spending on different activities. So in thinking about scheduling, the big picture takeaways are consistency and clarity, making sure we're keeping our routines consistent, and using visuals and timers for transitions so that we're clear about when things are happening. And then Grace, you'll have to click.
Oh, I have to click, sorry.
That's okay. But that being said, in the midst of structure and consistency and clarity, there's so much power in choice. I think that one of the things that we often forget is that kids at every age need some type of autonomy. Once you get even to those like terrible twos and those like say no to everything years, it's kids are exploring their own autonomy, and by giving them power and voice, they're going to be more motivated, and you're going to see better behaviors. So it allows them to choose between options, so that they feel like, oh, I got to pick today, and I get to pick this awesome activity to do. And then they're going to be more empowered and feel more ownership over what they're working on. It also models and provides structure. So it models for them what type of activities you can do in your free time. So rather than giving them an hour or two of unstructured time where they might not really know what to come up with, especially if it's one of the areas they're working on is that motor planning piece, that coming up with ideas and being able to sequence. Having choices is great for giving them a model of what's available and what's like an appropriate activity to be doing. And it can really steer them in the right direction of what activities you're wanting them to be doing in that moment. So circling back to the sensory piece, giving them choices over if we're going to do an animal walk spinning game or a yoga memory game, giving them two choices that you're both really happy with, but might make them feel more motivated if they know that they're getting to select the opportunity to do yoga or the animal walks, really giving them just that little bit of autonomy during the day that will help them feel more motivated and engaged. And so then at the bottom, this highlights just using two options that you're both happy with is a great way if you're trying to increase that motivation, rather than saying, it's time for us to do some animal walks, asking them to go choose out 3 animal walk cards, or say, pick out your favorite yoga game that we have and let's do that together, so that they are able to choose, but you're still directing them in that structured movement-based play that you're hoping for in that moment. So now I have some examples of different types of visual schedules to use that can really support the morning or the afternoon or the whole day for kids of any age. So especially now where the lines between like summer and home and summer break and school and everything is so blurred, it can be really helpful to have a schedule so that this whole day is broken down and like I said, with consistency and clarity. So the day can run more smoothly, and children can remain more regulated because they know what to expect. They know what's coming, and they know maybe that there's an activity they're looking forward to. They know what time of the day that's going to fit in. So there will be less maybe frustration if it's not happening right now, because they could see on their schedule that it's happening later. Or if they are needing to have movement breaks throughout the day and they get autonomy and they can choose which ones, they can put it on their schedule, and they then know what's happening throughout the day, and can really stay sort of structured, but also have that choice, that balance. So here's one where you can have a to-do and all done side that gives children an opportunity to really be hands-on and move the pieces when they're done, which gives them a sense of accomplishment and that kind of confidence of completing a task. But also, if you use Velcro and laminate it, this is something that you can rearrange throughout the day, whether there's change in the routine because let's say it's raining and you can't do an activity outside you wanted to do, you can switch it around. And it also gives you the opportunity in the morning to talk to your child about what order they want to do their activities, or what kind of craft they feel like doing that day. And so it allows you to provide a structure and a framework for the day where okay, I want yoga and I want some like music and movement so that we have some of that arousal increasing throughout the day, so we're not getting kind of stuck in that one headspace, one plane. But let's see, how can I structure the day to incorporate these things? Working with your child and showing them the options and having them pick what part of the day to put them in is a great choice.
Oh, I have to click.
So then this is a schedule that might work for a little bit of an older child, one who still needs some support in understanding what the choices are and the sequence of routines throughout the day. But I formatted it as like a checklist so they can check it off when they've completed it. And something nice about this one is you could print it out like this, but you could really also write it on a whiteboard and work together at the beginning of the day to collaborate on what the day is going to look like, or even use it on a piece of paper if you don't have a whiteboard, and just write out a list for them to check off when they've completed different activities. And you'll notice the categories are kind of broad to give that flexibility for choice. So in the moment, if after snack time, you need to do some work because you have some meetings to attend to, you could say, this is art time and you have these supplies and you're free to work on an art project at this table for an hour before we have a dance party to get moving before lunch. So it gives them that choice, but also tells them what's coming next, and then the sequence of activities and about how long they're going to be doing activities. So it's really that balance of choice and structure. And then the next one might be good for a child who's even a little bit older, where it has some times. So this one is just an example of if you wanted to provide times on a schedule, which is totally optional. And it really categorizes the activities by arousal level and sort of that type of activity you're working on. So this can be really, really good for those kids who often have a really high energy alertness at the beginning of the day and then tend to crash and have that really low arousal, difficulty participating in the afternoon, or vice versa. So really picking activities to target those systems to keep your child regulated throughout the day. That being said, as a bullet list, they get to choose which ones they want to do. So you make a list out of appropriate activities that are available and that are helpful for your child, and then they can select, today for my blue activity in the morning, I really want to read this new book that I got. And so they might select reading, and then they know that when it's time for the next thing, they're going to move on to a green activity, and that's their choice to pick what type of movement-based activity they want to do. And for you that this green activity is going to help them get that arousal up, might be alerting, but it also might have some organizing aspects of it. Scooter is both movement, but also heavy muscle work, and carrying laundry is the same thing. So like carrying a heavy basket around would be, hard work on your muscles and could really be organizing. So this one's great for really targeting that level of arousal and specifically kind of structuring your day around energy level and keeping your child regulated. And then this one is more of like a task list where you can, for a child who's even a little bit older, input those things that you're hoping to use throughout the day that can help your child stay regulated, like going on a walk, some chores that might be heavy work input, such as collecting the dirty laundry, carrying baskets from one room to another, taking out the trash, cleaning, But also it gives them a lot of flexibility throughout their day. So it divides it up into time of day so that, in the morning you're at least getting in a walk and some heavy work through laundry. And then in the afternoon, they're probably going to get in another walk, some heavy work through the trash, the cleaning, but they might also get some movement through time outside. So this one for a little bit of an older kid is great so that they're getting at least a dose of input in the morning and a dose of input in the afternoon. But again, it gives them that flexibility to really choose because they're getting older, and that amount of autonomy that they need and are seeking is going to be a lot higher. And then here's one where you can start really kind of bare bones and work together with your child, or they can work on their own if they're reaching that age, to create a list of what they're doing throughout the day and then check when complete. So having it color coded can be a nice visual cue to understand the different activities and the sequence. And you can create categories by activity level, so high arousal, low arousal, or by time of day you want to complete it in, or by amount of time, or if it needs to be a quiet activity because parents are working, an independent activity, and all of that. So even just a piece of paper with different colored markers can act as a great visual schedule for children. So then all of these kind of go to say, those are examples, but how do we do this? Like, how do you make a schedule? I know that so many parents will say, it's easy to, make a schedule for one day, but how do I make a schedule that's going to last for, a whole week or a month, or that's going to work for multiple days? So some big points are to keep it broad. So keep those categories or activities more broad so that day to day, like I said, for the art activity, they get to pick what they're using, but they know they'll be using their hands and creating something, but it could be a craft with paper or glue or beads or any type of activity they want to do in the moment. Another good point is to start with those daily routines. So begin with the things you're doing throughout the day: breakfast, lunch, snack time, get ready for bed, and even build in sensory activities at intervals around that, or attach them to those things. So attach, to kind of consolidate your structured day. Think about what sensory activity can we do right before lunch as like a lunch warm up. So putting in something like heavy muscle work, pulling a pillowcase that has stuffed animals inside, dragging that around the room, taking them on an animal ride to the table where we're going to eat lunch. Because having a big dose of input before meals can be really helpful for staying calm and regulated for sitting and participating at the table, as well as for structure. So combining those activities gives a big picture of, what happens next. After breakfast, we have some time where we've laid out our activities, and then it's, our input and our lunch. For them, it would be, animal ride to the lunch table and then lunch. And then another huge part is to have your child help with the schedule. So they're going to be way more motivated if it's something they collaborated on, so they can pose for photos. You can take pictures of their, pajamas and their snack table and all these things, and then put that in the schedule so that they are excited for it because it's specific to them, and have them choose what type of activities are going to go into it. They could make a jar of, green activities. That's all of their favorite, kind of higher energy activities, or have them draw their favorite yoga poses. And those can be their, blue category yoga poses or anything like that. Or even if it's just helping them decide what you're going to put on the schedule. So giving them choice and helping out to get more motivated. So here I took a chart and really wanted to show you how to do it, sort of walk you through it. So this would be like a one-day kind of schedule, putting in all the pieces. So the first thing you're going to do is start, like I said, with those routines. So things that you automatically are doing every day. So you have to like click for each one. Yeah. So adding the daily routines like breakfast, snack, family time, if that's something that's really important to you, something related to your work schedule. So if you know that right after lunch you have meetings and that needs to be quiet time, so putting in those sort of non-negotiables. We'll always be doing lunch. We'll always be getting ready for bed. And then next you think about those input activities. So things that are going to get you a lot of movement in different planes, things that are going to get you engaging your muscles, get you contact with the floor? How are we going to get you moving in these gaps that we have? So here I put family walk, play outside, and movement break. So right after breakfast to start the day and really set you up for success and really be proactive, like we mentioned. A great way to do that is start with a big dose of movement and input. So going outside not only is great for fresh air, but also gets your legs moving. It can get you in different planes. If we are going to be, walking as a family and then, turn it into I wonder if you can bear walk all the way to the next mailbox, or I wonder if you can act like a crab for the next 30 steps, something like that. Just little ways to get that input in the morning. And then after a snack, if you're feeling that kind of lull before lunch and maybe your child's getting a little bit irritable, that could be a great time to play outside. Also great to put in those big doses of sensory input before meals, like I just said. So it could be that outside time is where they really get in their tactile, they're rolling in the grass, they're digging in the sandbox, things like that. Could be their way that they really engage their systems. And then also a movement break in the afternoon. This could be when you give them some choice between different activities, between, pick out your animal walk cards, or, this is your movement break. Should we do dance party today? Should we do, go walk to the playground and swing for a while? And right after a quiet time where they're expected to maybe sit still or do something on their own, it would be a great time to sort of transition into something with more movement after they've maybe been sitting for a while. So then we still have some gaps in the schedule where there's more free time, and then it's like, what next? What do we put in here? So something to consider is having, like I said at the very beginning, that consistency and clarity, having a clear activity that you're putting in. So something like, every week we do FaceTime grandma on Wednesdays, so that they just know what to expect and it fits right into the schedule. Or Skills on the Hill is doing like weekly activity groups. So let's say your child loves to make creations with their hands. You could say, every day this week, we're going to be doing jewelry making with Grace at 10 a.m. So that would be something that can fit right into that schedule and give them something else that's either, a lot of heavy muscle work, because there are groups like there's a boot camp group, or it could be something where we've just gone on a walk and now we're going to sit and focus on something. So putting in science lab with Miss Audrey would be a great option for something like that, that really adds structure to your day, and sort of that 1 hour where that you're working on something that's maybe a little different from what you're doing throughout the rest of your day. And then the last part is that choice piece. So making sure that they have choice throughout their day, that autonomy is really crucial for them staying engaged in the schedule. Otherwise, they're not going to have any input and any motivation to participate in the schedule. So for here, I put John's choice, and I gave some options that would be good for another time of day where a parent is working and maybe isn't able to play with the child, so something they could do more independently. So it could be that John's choice happens now, but John knows that it's something a little more independent, art, sensory bin, puzzles, something like that.
And this can be an area too where, oftentimes a child in this day and age with technology might be inclined to choose screen time, which of course, within limit, as long as we're moderating that, that might be an appropriate choice activity. But also just kind of taking that extra step to be creative, to add some sensory based, more quiet activities. Like Miss Annie mentioned, maybe a sensory bin where they're getting to play with their hands, a puzzle, art, oftentimes activities that kind of involve use of their hands and a visual component can also be really regulating and fun activities that children enjoy. So that's something that, as we're talking about self-regulation and building the schedule, definitely thinking about incorporating these types of other quiet visual motor type activities, because more often than not, the child is likely going to pick screen time as their choice. So maybe it's that they get 20 minutes of screen time, you set a timer, and then after that they get to do this fun sensory bin where there are, little dinosaur toys or vehicle toys that are also things that they're motivated by. So that's something that's certainly important to consider too, because if it's, an hour or 2 hours of screen time and then it's dinner time and we haven't thought about doing, some sort of other activity that's regulating and kind of helps them to calm, then, dinner might be a little bit of a disaster. And you might see that difficulty with sitting at the table, or the irritability, or just difficulty managing that level of arousal.
Yeah. So then what happens when there's a change in schedule, which is completely inevitable? There will always be changes in schedules. Something that is really great to do starting a day in advance or that morning is to prepare the child for the change that's happening. So they know that a doctor's appointment will be coming up, or that today we have my meeting schedule is different and you will be with dad all morning, so that you will be doing different activities. So planning in advance to tell them what to expect. It's all about preparing them for what to expect. And then modeling flexibility and flexible thinking when unexpected events happen, things that we don't know are coming. So it's raining and we can't do our sidewalk chalk that we wrote down we wanted to do, or anything unexpected that is not able to change. Modeling flexibility. We talk a lot about the size of the problem, if something's a big problem or if it's a little problem, and what we can do when we experience little problems, like, find a way to change it, find a way to let it go. What can we do when there's a medium problem, something we have a harder time changing? We can ask for help. We can get ideas from adults of what else we can do at that time, and really modeling for them how to think flexibly and getting them involved in the problem solving. That's a huge way to build those skills, is helping brainstorm with them. Like, it's raining outside, so I don't know what we should do. We have written on our schedule sidewalk chalk. I wonder if there's anything else that we could do inside that's kind of like sidewalk chalk, something like that, to help them learn how to problem solve through those unexpected changes. And something that can be helpful about a schedule that uses a whiteboard or Velcro, or is written in pencil, is that you can change it as needed. So modeling for them with that visual cue of, this can't happen right now because it's raining. So if we move it here and we replace it with something else, we're still able to do both of the things we wanted to do today. And we're being flexible because some things happen that we can't control. And then if a schedule is not working, there are going to be some challenging moments where sometimes a child is just frustrated, or their arousal level is not a good fit for the activity that's coming up on the schedule. So one thing that can be really helpful is having tools in place for supporting them when they get into that higher arousal level or are becoming really frustrated. So something you can make at home is a break box. Here there's a picture of one that's like commercialized, you could purchase, but this is something you can totally make at home with a shoebox or a basket or a bin, and put in activities that are calming for your child, whether it's a squeeze ball, paper and crayons to color with, gum, something to squeeze, Play-Doh, different things to engage with that can be calming. So also, like Grace mentioned, those visual motor activities that can be really like regulating, something like playing with putty. It's heavy work to your hands, and it's visual, and it can be really calming, as well as reducing the sensory environment through headphones. And then also visuals can be really helpful in this moment to remind your child what they can do if they're feeling frustrated. And there are certain things you can't put in a box, like pushing against a wall or a weighted blanket or a deep breath. So having visuals can support in that moment as well. And knowing when to pick your battles. So knowing that I had an art project planned for the child, but if they're not in that regulated state to be able to do art, we're better off putting in some sensory activities that are going to help them get regulated to see if we're even able to get to the table for art, rather than trying the activity anyway when it maybe isn't the best fit. So we're having to work as detectives constantly to see, was this enough time on, jumping on our mini trampoline for him to really wake up, or is he still feeling kind of asleep? Do we need to add in some more regulating activities, get in some ice water to drink and squeezing something to really wake up in order to engage in art? Or if your child is still having a hard time calming down, to be able to sit still, finding that, maybe your child needs that 5-10 extra minutes in that moment, that could help really, so that you're able to participate in that next activity, that art project. Or it could mean that you adapt the art project to be able to move on for the rest of the day, but being able to pick your battles and then also work as a detective to really see whether your child is in that regulated state to participate in the schedule that's been created. And just keeping it simple. If your schedule's not working, maybe a little bit more simple. If they're having a hard time staying, keeping attention to activities for as long as you have scheduled out for them. It could be that morning is, play in my room, where it's, mom is working and I need you to be doing things in your room like Play-Doh and art and Legos. And then afternoon is, we're playing outside together. So something a little more vague where they have some choices and options, but it's more simple and easier for you to manage and for them to manage. Any questions?
Okay, questions. Any questions? All right, I'm going to stop recording.